Gather round me, everybody.
On December 7, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor without any warning. In response to that destructive action, several 100,000 Americans answered the call for help by joining the Army, Marines, and other forces. Thanks to my dad, I have had the distinct opportunity to interview U.S. Marine and longtime family friend, Mr. Fred Anito. Mr. Anito is an 89-year-old veteran who still gets haunted by his Marine memories to this day. He, like so many others, joined the Marines after hearing about what the Japanese did to Pearl Harbor. They had bombed the harbor and 2,402 were killed, 1,282 were injured. It sank 4 U.S. Navy battleships and destroyed 188 aircraft too. He also joined because all of his neighbors did and he didn't want to seem selfish. His main role in the Marines was flamethrower. Flamethrowers went before all the other soldiers to throw flames at enemies. Doing that would help shrink the number of soldiers they were fighting against. Mr. Anito fought in many battles including Bougainville, Guadalcanal, Guam, and more. World War II began because Germany wanted to invade Poland. Germany decided to dress up 2 dead Polish men as Germans and act like the Polish people had killed the fake Germans. Germany invaded Poland because of that. Japan wanted to have control of Korea and China. The only thing standing in their way was the United States, which is one of the reasons they bombed Pearl Harbor. After the bombing, Isoroku Yamamoto said, "I fear that we have awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve," thus starting World War II. The Battle of Bougainville began early in November 1943 when United States Marines invaded the 250-square-mile island. Bougainville is a province of Papua New Guinea and is the biggest of the Solomon Islands. It's located in Oceania. The Marines planned on seizing about 6 square miles in which they would construct an airfield. If the airfield was built, U.S. planes could easily fly over the South Pacific to as far as the Philippines because they could easily refuel. Japan discovered the plans and decided to attack head-on. After almost 3 years of brutal combat, the Japanese forces surrendered. It ended in August 1945. While in Bougainville, Mr. Anito lived in sticks and mud. It was always raining. On dry days, soldiers would dig foxholes in the ground to hide in for protection. They also slept in the foxholes. Mr. Anito remembers how the foxholes would often fill up with water, making many soldiers sick. He was part of a group of 400 Marines when they arrived, and during the 2 months he spent there, 150 men were killed. Mr. Anito also remembers a massive earthquake on the island which knocked down trees. The trees fell on 4 of his comrades. He also recollects seeing dead people constantly, which is something he won't ever forget. The United States wanted possession of Guam in 1944. They wanted it because it's located close enough to Japan so that the B-29s, which is a type of aircraft, could easily go back and forth between the two. In addition, the waters surrounding Guam were deep enough to dock ships. The island became a massive naval base. Japan also knew that Guam had these qualities, so they desired it also. Japan invaded and took over Guam the day following the Pearl Harbor attack. About 36,000 men were sent to fight for the U.S., and around 18,500 Japanese soldiers defended Guam. Out of the 36,000 United States soldiers, 1,747 died and 6,053 were wounded. Out of the 18,500 Japanese soldiers, 18,000 plus men were killed and 485 became prisoners of war. The Japanese refused to surrender and almost all the soldiers were killed. The battle went on from July 21st to August 8th, 1944. Mr. Anito was sent to Guam as part of the invading force in July 1944. In Guam, the majority of the fighting was in thick jungles. While in the jungles, he contracted malaria because of the constant rain, fierce jungle conditions, and disease-carrying insects. Mr. Anito remembers the cold sweats caused by the horrible disease. At one point of being sick, he weighed only 110 pounds. He was sent to Bethesda Hospital, a hospital for soldiers, in Maryland. He was in the hospital for about 7 months, being experimentally tested with a new drug. The hospital employees created the drug for malaria, and Mr. Anito was the perfect subject. Although the terrible disease malaria came close to killing Mr. Anito, it actually saved his life. While he was in the hospital, his unit got transferred to Iwo Jima. The United States decided the island of Iwo Jima because of where it is located. It's merely 660 miles south of Tokyo, which was necessary because the U.S. needed somewhere to land damaged aircraft and refuel. Japan found out about their plans of occupying the island and how it would aid in the invasion of Japan, so they prepared for battle. 21,000 armed Japanese soldiers defended Iwo Jima under the command of Master General Kuribashi. 110,000 armed United States Marines were sent to fight. 6,821 soldiers died and 19,129 were wounded. 20,703 Japanese died and 216 were captured. Again, the Japanese refused to surrender, so the soldiers died out. The battle went on for 19 days, from February 19th to March 9th, 1945. While Mr. Nito was in the hospital recovering from malaria, the remainder of his unit was sent to Iwo Jima. In Iwo Jima, many of his friends and all of his flamethrower comrades were killed. He was still in the hospital when Victory over Japan Day, also known as VJ Day, happened. It was at 6:10 p.m. on August 14th, 1945. He learned about it and was immediately flooded with relief and joy because he knew he wouldn't have to fight anymore. After the war ended, Mr. Nito received the Honorable Discharge Award for his bravery. When he came back home, he married the love of his life, Terry. They live in Long Branch, New Jersey, with their daughter Patty and her husband Reggie. Mr. Nito used to get together frequently with his war buddies, but he is now the last survivor from his unit. This one-man story is the story of hundreds of thousands of other World War II veterans. But because they risked their lives so we can be free today, I now truly believe that his was the greatest generation.